Today's date is January 13th, 2024. We are interviewing Aviva Cohen-Steinman. My name is Marla Schwartz, and we are doing the interview in Encino, California, and the language is in English. Today's date is January 13th, 2024. We are interviewing Aviva Cohen-Steinman. My name is Marla Schwartz. The interview is taking place in Encino, California, and the language is in English. For clarification, the pronunciation is Aviva Cohen-Steinman. Could you please state your name and spell it?
Aviva, A-V-I-V-A, Cohen, C-O-H-N, Steinman, S-T-E-I-N-M-A-N.
And what's your maiden name?
Cohen.
Great. What is your date of birth and how old are you today?
February 18th, 1936, and today I'm 87 years old.
Where were you born?
In Aschersleben, Germany. Do you want me to spell Aschersleben for you?
Yes, please.
A-S-C-H-E-R-S-L-E-B-E-N.
And where was that?
Germany.
Approximately, do you know where in Germany?
East Germany.
And what city did you live in, if different from your birthplace?
For a very short time, Gera, which I don't even know where it is, and Berlin.
Could you tell me your parents' names, please?
German or real names or their Americanized names?
Well, let's start with their German names.
My father was Fritz, and my mother was Meta.
And what was your mother's maiden name?
Finkelstein.
And your father's name was Cohen?
Fritz Cohen.
Where were your parents born?
My father was born in Breslau, Germany. My mother was born in Gumbinnen, Germany, East Prussia.
How did your parents meet?
My father was teaching Hachshara, which was a group preparing for young people to go to Palestine. And they met there.
And
they got married in 1934, and that was it.
What was your father doing?
He was a rabbi, but he was getting kids out of Germany if he could.
Could you tell me about your father? What was he like?
What do you want to know?
Whatever you want to tell me about your dad. What was his personality like?
He very humane, human. He just worked to preserve humanity. He was really, he did it here. He did it there. That's it. I can't tell you, I never met a person like him. He was way ahead of his time.
In what way?
In every way. You want me to give you an example?
Yeah.
When we got to New York, and he had a refugee congregation in Virginia, and he got on the train, and he sat in the back, and the conductor came to him and said, "You can't sit here," because it was reserved for, at the time, I guess they called them colored people. And he said, "I just left Nazi Germany. I'll sit wherever I want." And he stayed there. That's just who he was. Forever.
What about your mom? What was your mom like?
She was a housewife.
What was her personality like?
I would say she was very sweet, low-key, German, but not. She tried very hard not to be, so she kind of had a French accent. Well, not really, but yeah. And my father was a public speaker. She was the rabbi's wife. In those days, that's what you were.
So, so your father worked as a rabbi in Berlin?
In Berlin.
I'm going to pause you just for a sec for this very noisy
plane. Yeah. You always have to do that.
My father was an exceptional human being. Not because he was my father.
Right.
Just because he was.
Right.
Okay, we're clear.
Did your mother work in Germany?
No, but when we came here, she was a housekeeper.
Okay. And how many children did your parents have?
2, my brother and me.
And what's your brother's name?
Hillel, Hillel. He was born in 1938, still in Germany, in Berlin.
Okay. How did your parents feel at the time about having another child in Nazi Germany?
At what time?
When your brother was born, it was during...
It was already started there in 33. So how did they feel?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't supposed to be born there. My name is Aviva because I was supposed to have been raised in Palestine. At the time, there was no Israel. I don't know, my mother really didn't think he was going to survive. The story I heard was that she told the midwife to drown him because he couldn't breathe. But fortunately, they didn't.
He couldn't breathe because he was born...
Because he was Jewish and he wasn't going to survive.
Right.
But he did. And he's a rabbi.
Can you talk to me about any memories or stories you might have about your extended family members, like grandparents, aunts, uncles?
Okay, I really don't know if I remember them or if they're stories that I've heard because I was 3.5. I mean, I should have some memory. I probably remember my grandmother. My grandparents did not live in Berlin until we moved there, so they came to be with us. So obviously they were attached grandparents. Like, I can't imagine what their life must have been because I know how I feel about my grandchildren. And the fact that they missed out on what I have, I don't know. But so they stayed in Berlin. They were supposed to be on the ship, my grandparents were supposed to be on the ship that went to Cuba, The Voyage of the Damned. You remember that movie? They were supposed to be on that ship, but they didn't get, which was turned around anyway. So I really don't have any memories of them other than what, I know. And when they were, there was letters and so forth back and forth until they stopped. And my uncle lived with him, my mother's brother. My aunt, my mother had a sister who left for Bolivia with her husband I was born in February. They probably left in March or April.
Okay. And can you tell me about your paternal grandparents? What are your paternal grandparents'
I really don't.
names?
My paternal grandfather died when my father was 10. My grandmother died, fortunately, of natural causes at the age of 75, probably a month before she would have been picked up.
And did they have other children besides your father?
Yes, my father was one of 6. So the oldest one was killed in Auschwitz. The second oldest one emigrated to Palestine in 1933 and had family there, which I still have. The next one, between the oldest one and the next son was my aunt, who was killed in Auschwitz, taken into the gas chamber holding her year-old grandchild. Then came the third uncle that went to Palestine. Then came the fourth one who was not in a concentration camp, but my cousin who lives in Seattle, who's 98. She and her sister were taken, but my uncle and his wife were hidden. And so they came to Seattle where we were living after the war. And the one next to my father emigrated to Queens, New York. He had 5 children. Only the youngest one was born in the States. And 2 of them are still alive. And then my father, who was the baby.
Which grandparents of yours moved to Berlin to be with you?
My mother's parents.
And can you tell me about...
And her brother.
And your mother's brother. Okay.
And her sister, who left in 36. That family stayed together.
Okay. Okay. And so there were how many children on your mother's side
3.
then? 3. Can you remember anything about like your parents' socioeconomic status while living in Germany?
Well, we weren't allowed to come out with anything but $10 each. So when they give restitution now, it would be very hard. It was very hard for my father to have proved what his income was because of the war and so forth. So basically, I don't know. And he was in hiding a lot.
So how did your parents, pay for food, and how did
I
they
don't
make a
know.
living? Okay.
Obviously, they did.
Right. Do you remember anything about their home or your home in Germany, or did they tell you anything about it? Was it an apartment, a house?
It was an apartment, and it's no longer there. My grandparents' apartment is there. That's where those stumbling blocks are in front of. But where I was is not. It was on a main drag.
Was it part of a Jewish community, or?
I believe probably so. Passauer Strasse.
Okay.
Which doesn't mean much to me.
Do you know anything about the Jewish community in Berlin at this time? Because your father
I
was.
went to a Jewish day school, preschool.
Okay. Do you not remember any maybe holidays?
I really
or did your parents talk about it?
I have no memories other than it started maybe on the ship coming over and the Statue of Liberty. I may have repressed everything else. I don't remember. I know that I was questioned by the Gestapo a lot, so my parents would lie to me, so I would lie to them. So they told me lies, I told them, but they gave me candy, so of course,
Before Kristallnacht, how did your parents feel about living in Germany?
They were trying to get out. We had applied to Argentina, where my mother had a cousin, to Bolivia, to Shanghai, where my mother had a cousin during the war. They went there, to Palestine, which we thought we were going to, because my father was really active and working for it, to here, which came miraculously, to Uruguay, I think. Wherever we could apply to, they did. And this came through within 24 hours, I think.
Going back to your father's work with Palestine, was there a reason why he didn't go to Palestine when he was working for the organization at the time?
Because he was trying to get kids out. Parents didn't believe this was going to... German Jews did not think anything was going to happen to them because they were above the Eastern European Jews intellectually and so forth, and they really didn't think this would happen. And so he was working to get the kids out at least. And he did. Youth Aliyah, it was called.
Do you think that he felt it was going to happen?
He knew it was going to happen. They knew, everybody knew it was going to, people that were, yes. Before Kristallnacht, do you mean? Yes. Yeah. And I'm a technical survivor only because I was still there in Berlin after Kristallnacht, which was November 8th, 1938. And I didn't leave till May 39.
Well, speaking of that, do you know if anything happened? Like, what do you know about Kristallnacht? Like, what is your understanding of?
I know that they desecrated every Jewish thing they could find.
Did anything happen?
They broke windows. They burned books. They did everything. And and then they started picking up people off the streets and incarcerating them.
Do you know if this happened within your local community?
Well, yeah, in Berlin, yes. You had to be very careful going out there.
How did your father avoid?
My father went into hiding a lot.
Can you tell me about that? What he told you about?
Do you see the dress
his hiding?
The dress behind me?
Mm-hmm.
He was in Yugoslavia, hiding. He once smoked a tremendous amount of cigarettes to get into a hospital, which gave him Berger's disease, actually. You know, people didn't come to your door. I did hear that if they knocked on your door, you were so afraid. My father had one foot over the balcony once when a neighbor knocked on the door.
So when he smoked all those cigarettes and he had to go to the hospital.
Yes, that was to keep him off the streets.
How long was he in the hospital for?
Maybe overnight.
Do you know where else he hid?
What?
Do you know where else he hid? What other?
Cemeteries. He pretended to bury. As long as you got rid of Jews, they didn't care. So he pretended to bury Jews.
Was he with anybody else when he was pretending to bury Jews?
Yes, my uncle, who was my mother's brother, who looked very Aryan, and he was the grave digger. There is a story that there was a woman in a grave giving birth. I don't know how true that is, but yes.
So they pretended to work for the cemetery, and
no, they didn't. My father didn't work for a cemetery; he worked for the community.
Right, but they pretended to do that so that they
there were no bodies.
Right. Do you know? Did your parents ever talk to you about after Kristallnacht? Were there people in their community that weren't Jewish who might have shown any empathy or helped you guys at all during this time?
No.
Okay.
I think that's probably the city where I was born in Aschersleben, at the Yad Vashem in Israel. They have a wall outside, and my city where I was born, there were no Jews left at all in it, in Aschersleben. And in East Prussia, where my mother was from, they were pretty much gone also. So Berlin, they just picked them up and incarcerated them and then killed them. My mother happened to be very beautiful. They didn't bother her a lot.
So when your parents would bribe you or give you candy so that you would lie.
They didn't bribe me. The Gestapo bribed me.
Would this be on the street, or was this when they were coming to your house?
Probably. No, they didn't come to my house. It was probably on the street when I was coming back from school or whatever.
And what were they asking you?
I don't know. Questions about my father.
Right. Can you tell me about the immigration process and how your family navigated it?
Yes, you know that story, don't you? About me? I didn't know this story till I was an adult. They're leaving in the days in 39. There were quotas in America. There were quotas in most countries, which they don't have now, but quotas for immigration. So German Jews in 39. My father took Franklin Roosevelt's name when we came here. If he knew what we knew today, he wouldn't have, because that was part of the quota thing. But so there were long lines of people because you had to have certificates of health and whatever for your visa before you could leave. So we were walking. I don't think we were in line. My father took me. My mother was home with my brother. My father took me, and we happened to have passed the American consulate where there are thousands of people in line, from what I understand, at lunchtime. And this is, the only word I have for it is miraculous, because there's no other explanation. The vice consul from the American consulate came out at the same time as we were passing, and he came to me. And fortunately, I was not one of those babies, and I was really friendly. And he said to me, "Little girl, where do you want to go?" And I said, "America." And apparently had a little conversation with me. And he said to my father, "Bring me her picture tomorrow." And he signed us out, and we were out within 24 hours. My father never said goodbye to his mother.
So your father never said goodbye to his mother. What about your grandparents who were living in Berlin?
We said goodbye. We packed, we went. we got on the train. Okay, so when we left from Rotterdam, Holland, on a ship called the SS Statendam, which is still in existence, but I'm sure it's not the original ship. We went from Berlin by train to Rotterdam. But there were soldiers on the train. My mother was terrified, as well as she should be, with 2 little kids and my father. And I don't know where he was on the train, but anyway, we got to Rotterdam, and because of his smoking thing, they wanted to amputate his leg. And my mother said, no, if they amputate it, they'll amputate it in America. I'm not staying. We're getting on that boat. And we got on the ship. And we were not steerage. We were passengers. And we went to New York and as refugees. And there was no Ellis Island. Ellis Island was closed when we came in. So my first memory is the Statue of Liberty.
That's your first memory. Okay. Just going back a little bit, your grandparents and aunts and uncles who remained in Germany, were they trying to get out as well?
Everybody was trying to get out. There was no Jew that wanted to stay there. They were being picked up daily.
Right.
I mean, I've had cousins that ended up in Israel that were picked up and then got out. And then one of them went on an illegal boat to Palestine and was blown up in the harbor. Well, he wasn't, and his friend were on the ship, and he dragged the friend, and the friend was dead into shore.
How did the boat blow up?
British, because Palestine was a mandated colony by the British. So it was these were all illegal. If you saw Exodus, they were not legal people going in.
Right. Going back again to the immigration process, do you remember, did your parents ever relay to you what preparations they made to leave? What they were allowed to bring with them?
$10.
Were they allowed to bring suitcases, clothes?
They must have brought something because I remember a teddy bear. But probably not very much. And then we in New York, we lived in Washington Heights, which is now Spanish Harlem, which was basically a refugee commune when we came there, all German refugees.
Just want to clarify, like when you were on the boat, I know your first memory was seeing the Statue of Liberty. How did your parents tell you how long that trip took, or did
I think it was
memories?
maybe 2 weeks. I remember walking with my father on the deck. I remember my mother was in the room with my brother. That's it.
Okay. So, and then when your father arrived in Rotterdam, did he have to go to the hospital?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. No. We were going from the train to the boat.
Well, who wanted to amputate his leg?
I guess the doctors there. I have no idea. I don't know.
Oh, right.
I don't think you just got off the train and got on the boat, but yeah.
I understand. So when you arrived, did you have a sponsor in America?
Yes. An uncle of my mother's who we didn't know, who I don't think we ever met, in Chicago.
Oh, and you never met him? Do you know his name?
I think his last name was Foster from Finkelstein. But yeah, never met him.
Did they change your names when you came to America?
Change whose names?
Did you change? Like, did your parents change?
What are you going to change? No.
Like, no, but your first name? Was there another name on your passport when you
No,
came?
it's Aviva Sarah Cohn. Sarah was given to me by the Nazis. Every Jewish woman has Sarah. Every Jewish female had Sarah on their passport. And every Jewish male had Israel given to him as a middle name.
And that was on all of your passports.
Them.
Oh. So do you have any memories of living in New York?
Of New York?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your memories? Like, what do you remember?
I think we lived in a tenement, and so my mother would take us out at night to the park to sleep. My father was looking for jobs and learning English.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't speak English, but being that he was a public speaker eventually. I had an aunt and uncle in Queens who the aunt wasn't very nice. She used my mother as a babysitter so they could go out. Yeah, that great memories. And then we went to Walla Walla, Washington.
Well, before we go to Walla Walla, I want to talk about also the anti-Jewish laws in Germany and how that affected
the park bench. My father and I were walking. He would take me walk. I mean, he would take me out.
In New York?
No, this was in
Germany.
Berlin.
Okay.
And walking through the park, and there were signs all over, no Jews, no dogs. And I wanted to sit down, and he said, no, we couldn't. There's a sign, no Jews, no dogs. So we just kept walking. When we got to New York, we were walking in Central Park, my father and I, and he went to sit down on a bench, and I said, you can't. And he said, why? I said, no Jews, no dogs. So I remembered.
Yeah. Do you remember anything else that the anti-Jewish laws?
I was 3.5.
But did your parents tell you anything else that they weren't allowed to do?
Until the end of World War II, which was, I was 9, we lived basically as enemy. We were enemy aliens. So we had curfew. We really associated mostly with other refugees because our lives were so different. So growing up, when I went to grammar school in Seattle, I had an accent. I would say 1, 2, 3 or whatever. I was called Hitler's daughter. So more of the trauma happened to me here than happened to me there.
Right. Well, how long were you in New York for?
Maybe 9 months.
And you were with other refugees?
Yes.
And then where did you go after New York?
Walla Walla, because my father was offered a job, and he worked in a salvage yard as like an accountant, but we had a synagogue in our house, and we had the USO there, and he was a civilian chaplain for Pendleton Air Force Base in Oregon. So. And I think he taught at Whitman College in Walla Walla. And this was all in the process of learning English also.
That was my next question, was how long did it take for you to learn English?
I probably didn't speak English till I was 5.
What about your parents?
Well, I mean, it was a process, but did we go to school to learn? No. So we picked it up. I remember in Walla Walla, a neighbor kid asked me to say something in German. And I said, okay, what? And she said, noodle. So I said, noodle. And they punched me because it is noodle.
Wow. Right. How long would you say you started to feel comfortable?
In America?
Yeah.
After the war?
It was after the war?
After World War II?
Once your family came to America, did they continue with their religious beliefs and traditions?
My father had in Seattle, once we left Walla Walla.
How long were you in Walla Walla for?
1940 to 1942, maybe.
Okay.
Then we went to Seattle, and my father had the largest conservative congregation in Seattle.
He got a job as a rabbi there?
Yep. And we were there until 1948, when he was asked to be the director of Labor Palestine for Israel to become a state. So he left the pulpit for 2 years, and we lived in San Francisco then. So that was it. But
let's go back to Seattle for a little bit.
Seattle.
Tell me about Seattle. How long were you there, and what was it like living
Seattle there? Was, well, I hear a story that I went under my mother's skirt one day in a department store because I told her there was curfew. My father couldn't come home at night because we had curfew. First of all, we lived on the West Coast, so it was different than people that lived on the East Coast because we had the Japanese on the West Coast who were terribly persecuted. And it was, I was teased a lot.
For being German?
Well, yeah,
And for
for
having...
being an alien. And I became a citizen with my parents in 1944.
So in Washington, did you mix with other refugee children?
Mostly other refugees because we had the same lifestyles.
Mm-hmm.
But we tried very hard to assimilate my family, which I think helped me a lot. I wanted to be an American. I did not want to be. I knew other refugee kids who kind of hung on to the German thing. Not me.
How did you break away?
Let's pause just for one brief moment for this plane.
I hear it, yeah. I didn't hear it before. But tell me, before we get back, tell me some stories about, how, the other refugee children and how you tried to break out of...
How what?
Like how you tried to break away from that refugee life,
I had American friends.
Okay, well, hold on. We'll go back.
You're good.
Okay, so now that we're back.
I associated with American kids.
And when did that start, would you say?
When I moved to Seattle, when I went to school there.
How old were you when you moved to Seattle?
5, 6.
But did your family do things with other refugee families? And
Yes, because that's because they have the same lifestyles. And then my uncle, the third one, the one whose daughters were in the concentration camp and one was killed, they came to Seattle. So
after the war.
Yeah, after the war, from a DP camp.
Right. Okay.
You know what DP camp is?
Yes. You want to tell us?
Displaced persons.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I had pictures of them in the trains. But my mother, until the day my mother died not knowing where her parents were killed. She thought they died in Auschwitz. They didn't. They died, they were taken to, and the elder transport, they were probably in their 60s. Mm-hmm. They were taken to Riga, where my grandfather was from, I think, and they were killed there. My uncle, who still remained in Berlin until a few months later, was taken to Auschwitz and died there.
Well, that brings me to my next question.
And my cousin that came after the war, the DPs, her sister, she's the one that lives in Seattle now, her sister was killed and she died in her arms. She was shot when they tried to escape a train.
So do you remember where you were when you learned that the war was over?
Yeah, in Seattle.
And do you remember what you did? Or
yeah, went into a garage with a bunch of other 9-year-olds and smoked cigarettes.
Where were the parents?
Partying, I guess. After VE Day. Yeah.
So tell me about how you actually discovered the fate of your family.
Through other people that came, through other survivors that came to Seattle that knew, it was a small Jewish community, basically. So other survivors knew other survivors knew other survivors. So you heard the stories. So I don't know how my mother heard that her parents were killed in Auschwitz, which wasn't true. And through records, Germans were very good keeping records. The Nazis, they kept great records. So through that, through agencies,
mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Do you think?
I was a child.
Right.
I mean, I was 9 when the war ended.
Right.
I do remember throwing a tin can at a guy who, on a bicycle, who called me Hitler's daughter. I thought I killed him, so I kept looking in the paper to see if I killed him, but I didn't.
How old were you?
Maybe 9, 8 or 9.
How many times were you called Hitler's daughter?
Probably a lot. First of all, I was an enemy alien. It was World War II. We were in school, in grammar school. The war was very prevalent. A lot of these kids, their parents were off in the war or whatever, soldiers. The Japanese that were living in the States that were taken. My father hired the first Japanese out of the camps.
To do what?
He was a janitor in the temple, but at least he gave him a job.
Right.
There's pictures in the paper. But, these were different years. I mean, I tried not to associate with a lot of the refugee kids that went to school with me. They kind of hung out together. I didn't hang with them. I had American friends and neighbors.
And this is in Seattle. Was there a large Jewish community of
in
refugees?
Seattle?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, and a large Jewish community. Period.
How did the Jewish community welcome the refugee Jews?
We were kind of stuck together because we couldn't do the things they did. We had to be in at a certain time, indoors. We had because of curfews. You just couldn't tell us apart because we looked the same. But our lifestyles were different. We had rationing, like everybody else, but it was just different. My father couldn't come home a lot of evenings after curfew, if it was dark. And I had parents with very thick German accents.
Mm-hmm. So how long did the curfews last for?
Until after the war.
Why was there a curfew? Do you know?
Yeah, because they were afraid we were going to get bombed, and because we were enemies of the state. Enemy alien means you're an alien. You're not a documented citizen, and you're an enemy of the state. We were Germans. Even after we became citizens, we were still Germans. So they didn't know if we were going to turn on them or whatever. I mean, I guess.
Did you ever feel like you had to hide that you were
I
Jewish?
never hid what I was, no.
How about
that I was Jewish? Never. And I never would. And if anybody ever came after me, well, I'd throw a tin can at him. I mean, no.
Can you talk to me about the type of traditions and practices that your parents kept in the home?
We kept kosher. We made Seder we had, in Seattle, we had female waves and wax. We rented rooms too in our house. We had the USO in Walla Walla in our house. And when we had Seders, we had Jewish soldiers over all the time that we would feed. So, yeah.
Did you...
And sailors, because Seattle was close to a naval base.
Did you do Shabbat and all the other
We
holidays?
actually walked to the temple every week, or the synagogue. I wanted to go to the Reform temple because my friends were Reform. So I was really a rebel very early. Because there were 3 congregations that were very big in Seattle. Orthodox, or Sephardic, 4. Orthodox, Sephardic, conservative, and Reform. And we were conservative.
So your father was
He was a
the
big shot.
rabbi.
My father was, yes. My father was friends with the governor. My father was very politically inclined. Very political. He was friends with Roosevelt's daughter, who lived in Washington State. I think with his son, Jimmy. He was friends with the governor of that's how he became involved with creating Israel. And then when we went to San Francisco, that's when Israel became a state. And I remember that clearly.
How did your dad go from being a refugee with $10 in his pocket to hanging out with Roosevelt?
He worked in a salvage yard, in a junkyard.
But how did his trajectory, do you know, like, or do you remember how he sort of moved up? Because that's amazing.
He moved there for the synagogue, which was in our house in Walla Walla. But he had to make a living. So he worked for one of the congregants who owned a salvage yard or a junkyard.
But
my mother worked in one of their homes as a housekeeper. Couldn't boil water, but she did.
But what I mean is, it's pretty miraculous to think, he became such an important figure in the Jewish community in Seattle, and, just a few years prior couldn't speak English.
Because that's who he spoke English by then.
No, but I mean, when he came over, did he speak English when he came over?
No. So he went to refugee communities, but he learned English very rapidly. I mean, he worked at learning English because that was his job.
Hold on one moment.
Yeah. Before you go back, I was just like, it's pretty cool that your dad, was a refugee, and then all of a sudden he's like, rubbing elbows with Roosevelt's daughter. Like, that's amazing.
She was just another human being.
But it doesn't matter. Like, your father was like a big macha.
But he was a big macha. I mean, he was a big wheel. He was
well, that's
one
what
of a kind.
I want you to talk about.
Let me just tell you an off-camera story.
Okay.
UCLA has Brotherhood Week, or had Brotherhood Week, okay? Mm-hmm. My father was invited to a sorority to have dinner with them, a Gentile sorority. They kept inviting him back because they loved him. He was just them, part of them. His cousin walked with Martin Luther King across Selma, across the bridge.
Very progressive.
I mean, his first cousin from New Jersey. Mm-hmm. They were just very involved.
But that's why, let's talk about, when we go back on camera, tell me about how your dad became
politically involved.
Yeah, politically involved.
Well, obviously he was in Germany already if he was trying to get these kids out.
Right. So
so he was always politically involved.
So going back to talking about your dad, how would you say he basically went from, being a refugee to being such an important and well-esteemed member?
Because he was a rabbi refugee. He wasn't just a refugee that came off the boat, okay? So he must have had credentials when he got here.
And was well regarded by the people around him.
Pardon me?
Was well regarded by the people around him.
I guess. And hired by other refugee congregations. So.
Oh, that's okay.
And he stood his ground. He just stood for what he believed in.
Yeah. Which
made us a much stronger family and a much more integrated family than the normal refugee families. So I think.
He was about integration as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what made me more American than my cohorts in school, maybe.
How about your mother?
She just went along with she did. She was a wife of a rabbi. She just did what she had to do, I guess.
Right. Did you meet up with any survivors from your family after the war?
My cousin, my uncle, when they came to Seattle.
Right.
And then we left for San Francisco shortly after they got there.
Did they stay in Seattle?
They stayed in Seattle.
And what did you do in San Francisco? What year was it when you moved to San Francisco?
1948. I was the end of my 6th grade, and it was very traumatic because they took me out of school. But my father had to go to San Francisco to be the West Coast director of Labor Palestine. So, yeah.
And what did
we entertained some very hot shots from Palestine, Israel, the presidents and the whatever that came. And on the night that Israel became a state, I was outside the San Francisco Opera House with Berkeley had exchange students from Israel. Very few were here at the time, but Berkeley had a lot more than other places. They came into San Francisco, and when they announced the partition was over, we all danced the hora outside the Opera House in San Francisco for hours.
Wow.
Yeah, it was fun.
So how long did your dad stay, or how long did your family stay in San Francisco for?
We moved to the Valley in 1950.
Okay.
To North Hollywood, and he was hired to open a temple in North Hollywood. The only thing is that it really wasn't organized. They had no insurance. They had nothing. It was called the Free Synagogue, and some very well-meaning person wanted to collect on insurance, which apparently they didn't have, and burned it down.
So what happened?
That was not very good for my father. I think that, yeah, he did not do well after that. And then they went into the city. My father just never really attached a lot. He was more political from then on.
Did he continue working as a rabbi?
Yes, he was always a rabbi.
For different congregations?
And a very well-respected rabbi, actually.
For different congregations?
Because of the congregation?
No, for different congregations he moved
Yeah,
around?
he kind of floated or started or what, you know.
Right. How was living in California different than living in Seattle at that point?
I really only know California. I mean, I came here when I was 12. Mm-hmm. That's all I really know.
By the time you were in California, did you feel like you were fully assimilated?
By the time I was what?
In California, did you feel like you were fully assimilated?
I was fully assimilated after the war in Seattle. I was.
When did you lose your accent?
I still have an accent, apparently, because people think I'm a New Yorker, and I'm not. It's my accent. No? Do you hear anything? I actually didn't know the word chore to pronounce until maybe a few years ago. It's chore, right? I said sure. There's things I didn't know. So, but yes, people have always said, oh, you have a New York accent. No, I don't. It must be a held over German accent. I mean, I still speak German. It was my mother tongue. I don't speak it very well anymore, and I don't read and write it.
What did you speak in the home? Especially when you
English.
When you first came, did you speak?
German.
German.
They didn't speak any. Nobody spoke English.
When did you all start speaking English, would you say, in the
I
home?
would say when we got to Walla Walla. I don't remember really. But I would say probably by the time I was 5, maybe, when this person asked me to say noodle.
And your mom too, she felt...
She learned English also. Till the day she died, she had her verbs mixed up and would say, up the hill the soldiers are coming down. But yeah. She had an accent. My father had an accent. My father... My mother sent him once for sponge cake, and he wrote down Spunch. Okay? And August was August. I mean, there's certain things you can't lose. And definitely there was an accent left there. He had a great speaking voice and was a very good speaker. So, but there was definitely an accent. They came as adults. People that come after 12 don't lose their accents from wherever they're from. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
How about your brother?
My brother thinks he speaks German. He can't, he has an American accent. I don't. Like if you say cake in German, it's Kuchen. Kuchen. He says Kuchen. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Right. Yeah. So when you were in California, would you say, like, how did your dad and your mother's, the way they raised you with Judaism, you said you wanted to be a Reformed Jew. How did it affect you?
I rebelled.
In what way?
I rebelled since I was a kid. I'm not religious. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. I'm not religious today. I wasn't religious probably ever. I went along with the ride, when I was a child, but I mean, I know the traditions, but no, do I observe? I'm not observant at all. And the minute I moved out of my house, I was definitely not kosher.
How did you rebel early on?
I just didn't do what everybody else did. My brother did. I didn't.
Do you have an example?
Just socially.
And what you ate? And like what you ate or...
do you want me to tell you my bacon story?
Sure.
Okay, my best friend went to her house one night, stayed over, and in the morning her mother said, "What do you want for breakfast?" And I said, "I don't know." She said, "Do you eat bacon?" I said, "No, but I'll try it." So I did. And the next time I went over, she said, "What would you like for breakfast?" I said, "Bacon." She said, "What would you like with it?" I said, "More bacon." I ate a pound of bacon. I was like addicted. Well, in between, I was waiting for the acne to come out and for the sky to fall. Nothing happened. So, hello. Yeah, so I was a rebel from, way back.
Did you tell your parents?
Oh, my father knew everything I did. Everything. He and I were walking. You know where Cantor's was on Fairfax? Okay. His synagogue, the Kadima Temple, was on Melrose and Crescent Heights. And so we were coming out of Cantor's, he and I, and he had his arm around me. And these two women passed by and went, the rabbi was such a young girl. I turned around and I said, "Yes, but he has a lot of money." Okay, that's just who I was. And he was hysterical. He thought it was the funniest thing in the world. I would do things like that. Not, and he went along with it.
Did you ever share your experiences in Germany with anybody when you first came? Did you talk about it with friends?
I didn't have friends. Refugees didn't have friends. You came, you were a refugee. You lived in a refugee environment, but I didn't know other refugees in New York.
Or in Walla Walla or in Seattle?
In Walla Walla, there was another family that we stayed very close with. And then when we moved to California, they moved to California and so forth. They stayed in San Jose. He was a doctor. And we stayed friendly even when my kid was bar mitzvahed in the valley. But basically, no, you just picked and chose. That was my parents' friends, though. Do I have refugee friends? No.
So
I had a lot of Israelis.
There's a plane coming.
Does he need to stretch?
No, okay.
I have Israeli friends. I had a lot of Israelis.
That was
That's where I wanted to go.
Though,
That's
right?
where I wanted to be.
Right.
I did not want to be a German. I wanted to be a Palestinian. Or I would have been a Palestinian.
Okay. Did you feel as though what happened to your parents' family affect the way they raised you in any way?
Well,
their
yes,
history.
It affected me. Okay. My mantra is, I have 4 granddaughters. Okay. My mantra for life has been, the madman didn't win. I'm here. I had 3 children. I have 4 grandchildren. The madman didn't win. The madman will never win. May try, but if it will never take me with him or them. So did it affect my life? Of course it affected my life. When I look at my granddaughters and I know how deeply I love them and how much I love them and I live for them, I missed out on that. And I know they missed out on that. Okay, if they moved to Berlin because of us, I know they missed out on that. So yes, I mean, when I was preparing for this, that's the part that's been with me. That I missed having that they missed having this. The feeling that I have for my grandchildren, they must have had for me and for my brother, because we were the only grandchildren. If they moved from their original city to Berlin to be with us, I mean, there's nothing that can change that. But yeah, I missed out. I have friends who go, oh, my grandparents or my aunts and uncles. I didn't have that. I had adopted aunts and uncles in Seattle, my neighbor across the street, who I'm still friends with, the daughter who's 90 and lives in Calgary, Alberta. I called them Aunt Sophie and Uncle Jack. I had no relatives. So that was my life. That's the life of a refugee, different from one that's born and raised here. Would I trade it? Of course I would trade it. I would trade it to have been born here, to have my grandparents be here, to have had grandparents at all. I mean, there are people of my generation that had grandparents, not everybody, because people did die younger. But yeah, that was a different life.
When you were older and you could talk about these type of things, like
to who?
With your parents.
To who?
No, when you talked to your parents
to about their parents.
Yeah, did they ever talk to you about the way you're talking to me about your feelings? Did they talk to you about their feelings of loss? Or
no? But I remember when we found out that my grandparents were picked up from Berlin. We were in Walla Walla, and I remember my parents were hugging each other and crying. I remember those things. So I'm sure I remember further back, but I just don't want to know. So I repressed it. I don't know. So I probably have some PTSD, or a lot, but yeah.
You have memories of that, but did they ever sit you down and talk to you when you were in high school, when you were able...
About my family that's dead?
About the history of your family.
What history?
Before the war, what their family lives were like.
Like Germans? It was like everybody else of that century or of that generation.
Right.
I don't know. I was born at home. My aunt was in the house when I was born. My father's mother was in the house when I was born.
Oh.
I mean, it was a whole other lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then I do remember but I don't know if it's real or if it's a story, that I liked coffee. So my grandmother, my mother's mother, my grandmother, Oma Mata, was her name. Her real name was Marta. She made hot milk and put a drop of coffee in. So I had coffee in her apartment. That is a memory I think I may really have. That's it. And then walking down the street also with my aunt, my mother's sister who left for Bolivia. We were on a bus, and I'm very vocal, and I started calling out all these Jewish names. Oh, look, there's Sarah, there's Max, whatever. People that I saw on the street. She got off the bus, and we walked the other direction for miles. I mean, yeah, I didn't know. I was a kid.
Right.
I think they probably protected me from what was going on as much as they could.
So when you were in North Hollywood, you were in high school at that point?
Junior high when I got to North Hollywood.
And then high school?
And then high school.
What happened after high school?
What?
What happened after high school? Did you go to college?
After
Did you
high school, I went
work?
I went to dental assistant college and got a degree and became a dental assistant. I hated it. And then I went to work for Kaiser and I was an x-ray technician. I liked medicine. I wanted to be a doctor, but in those days, women did not become doctors, very rarely. I was very social, which definitely didn't help. Jewish women definitely didn't become doctors. Jewish men had to go out of the country. So I was just a social butterfly. I don't know. I just played.
When did you become a citizen again?
With my parents, Veterans Day, November 11th, 1944, 11/11/44. I have pictures.
And your brother as well?
The four of us in the judge's chamber in Seattle. And we were buying war bonds at the time. So we bought war bonds in his chamber. Yes, they sold war bonds.
So jumping forward again, after you became an x-ray technician, did you get married? Did you find
Yes, I did.
Can you tell me what his name is?
Do I have to?
You don't have to do it.
Yes, I got married to a very popular guy that went to the same high school as me, but graduated before me. And we had a son.
What is your son's name?
Michael, and he's a professor in Kentucky. He has a PhD. And then I got divorced, thank God.
How long were you married?
2 years and 11 months too long. And then I remarried again, which I didn't think I would do so early, but I remarried. And I had 2 wonderful, lovely children.
And what was your husband's name?
Al.
And did you
And
ever talk?
One sec,
Oh,
sorry.
plane. Okay. Was Al in the Army?
Al was in the Navy. He was a lieutenant JG. Do you want me to tell you about Al?
Yeah.
I have pictures of him in my phone.
Yeah, tell me.
In uniform.
Because you guys had something in common, you know, in a way. Like he was fighting.
I had something in common with Al.
Don't you think? Like in terms of your history, like
He he came from Russia. His mother called me a Deutschki.
Oh.
I had nothing in common with them.
But was he? Don't keep it off.
We're clear.
Tell me about Al.
What about him?
Was he?
He was the father of my 2 children, who are the parents of my grandchildren.
Was Al in the Army or during the war?
Al was born in Pennsylvania to immigrant parents from Russia. And he went into the Navy and he became a lieutenant JG, junior grade. I think he was the youngest officer. And then he went to Princeton to officer training school. And that's where he learned how to really eat with a knife and fork and stuff. Yeah, it was a whole other ball game once he went in the service and learned. And I met him because his brother was president of my father's congregation.
In California.
In Los Angeles.
Did he see combat?
What?
Did he see combat?
No, he saw Guam, but no, he did not see combat. This was already the end of the war.
And what are your children's names that you had with Al?
I had Lisa, who is the mother of, do you want me to tell you who the mother of?
Mm-hmm.
She's the mother of Alexa, my firstborn baby, and Ariana. Alexa's 23, Ariana's 21. Alexa's a graduate of Berkeley. Ariana's a graduate of William and Mary. Then I have Todd, who is 50. Lisa's 54. Todd is 52. He's the father of Amber, who's 21 also. She's 11 days younger than Ariana. and she's at University of Chicago. And the father of Molly, Sierra, who's a songwriter-singer, but really professionally acclaimed. So didn't do bad, Lee, at all.
Were any of them named after any of your
All
three
three
children?
of them are named after Al.
No, oh, your
Alexa,
grandchildren.
Ariana, Amber, and Molly from my mother, Miriam. Where her mother says she's named after her grandmother who was alive at the time, but she's basically named after my mother.
What about
And
Lisa?
Lisa is named after my aunt, Tanta Leah, my mother's sister, who was in Bolivia and came here in 1951. I loved that woman. Loved her. Had no children. She was married to a Polish stateless person. That's why they had to get out really quick. And they did very well in Bolivia, actually. He was a shoemaker or something. And then they opened a store in North Hollywood. And of course asked me to help out because it didn't speak English. And I didn't realize that. So when the first customer came in, he wanted to know how to greet them. I said, say hello, you son of a bitch. And he started to. I didn't realize that he took me literally. So yeah, I stopped him. Yeah, it was bad, but I was funny bad.
What about Michael and Todd? Were they named after anybody?
Michael was named after my mother's father, Max, and her brother, Herman. So he's Michael Howard. Lisa is Lisa Michelle after my aunt, Tanta Leah, and my grandmother, Marta. Todd, fortunately, didn't have to be named after anybody.
Okay. Did you ever return to Germany?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell me about that?
10 years ago, 1970, 10 years ago, I think it was 10 years ago, the German government sent for, I was not born in Berlin, so I didn't know that I was part of this, but I was apparently. They sent for people as part of the restitution, I guess. So I was the last group because we were so young. And so they sent airplane tickets, Lufthansa. We flew, my daughter and I, for 2 tickets, a week in Berlin in a very nice hotel. They gave us, I think, $400 and toured us through Berlin. Did it mean anything to me? No. Nothing. I mean, I was at the wall. I mean, I saw things that I didn't really care to see
What
or
did
want
you
to
see?
see.
What did you see?
I mean, things that were on the tour. I guess museums of Holocaust museums or whatever they had. It was all Berlin. And then at the end, our guide told me about these things called Stolpersteine, which translates to stumbling blocks, stumbling stones, which some artist created out of brass plates and put in the cement in front of the homes where the Jews were taken or where their businesses were. So I have a picture of the stumbling blocks or the Stolpersteine in front of my grandparents' apartment with their names and my uncle's name. That was the most memorable thing that I came back with and told my brother about, and we paid for whatever they were, and that was, because there was no place. When we went, they took us to a place in Berlin that was surrounded by mansions. Now, I speak the language, but nobody knew that because of the way I speak, right? And I heard very bad things about Jews from a guy that owned like a 7-Eleven. But anyway, there were railroad tracks that were there with the names of the concentration camps. Treblinka, all the concentration camps And I said, there was a rabbi from Canada, I think, on our tour. And I said, this would be a good place to say Kaddish. Because I don't think these people, that anybody had ever said anything for them. They just disappeared. So that was kind of moving. And that was I guess I got more in touch with my past than what is their present.
Right.
You know, walked down the streets that I knew the names of and so forth, but didn't mean anything to me.
Did you look for your old house?
It's gone. I knew that was gone. That was bombed during the war. It was a main drag.
But your grandparents' place is still there.
My grandparents' place was still there. And there's a synagogue that was hidden behind gates, which was in the East Berlin, that since the wall came down. So I did go there. That's been reconstituted or retransformed. So that was kind of interesting, with a lot of Israeli security. Gee, now I'm remembering Berlin, but not much. Lisa probably knows more than I do. She got off the bus a lot. Stuff I didn't want to see.
Right. How about your connection with Israel? Can you
What
talk
about
to
it?
me? You have family in Israel?
Yes.
Who are the family members?
My father's, the third child, Ernst, which is a very weird story, okay? You ready for this? Ernst married, and my aunt Paula, they were brother and sister. Paula and Ernst were brother and sister, my father's brother and sister. Ernst married Paula's brother. Paula married Ernst's sister. Okay? So they're double cousins. They had children. Ernst went to Palestine in 1933 with Emma, his sister-in-law cousin, his sister-in-law wife. They had two children who were born in Breslau still, who moved to Palestine. And Paula had three children. Paula's the one that went to the gas chamber holding her oldest son's child. The middle one is the one that was on the ship that was blown up in the harbor. And the youngest one was 17 years old, survived the war, and died of typhoid 3 days later. He was in the concentration camp, 17. So the ones that moved to Palestine were double cousins. They had two daughters, one of which Alexa's very close with one of them, who I'm very close with, who lives in Rehovot. One of them, the younger one, who got the genetic disease of the parents being not just cousins, but double cousins, just died about 6 months ago. Yeah, not good. She was blind. She was, beautiful, but not good. So, and then the brother, the other cousin, there was Yehudit, who's Nurit, who's alive, the one that lives in Rehovot, and then her brother Yitzhak, who was Ginter. He's dead, but his son Alon was married to the Israeli ambassador to Turkey, or Israeli ambassador she is. She just retired. Well, had to leave Turkey, so yeah. And so they're around. They're in Israel. They have families that Alexa knows.
Alexa, your granddaughter.
Alexa, my granddaughter, who is there.
Have you been to Israel?
Yes, many times.
Visiting family?
Visiting family. I wanted to live there, so we actually picked up in 1973, right after the Yom Kippur War. And we rented a house in a very nice area. And Al was going to try to start a business, but he had an American mentality. He just couldn't. People were rude. Israelis were rude, okay? Not intentionally. That's just that's who they are. That's their makeup. They're not nasty. They're just not kissy. They're just not phony. So he couldn't handle the mentality. I mean, if he was knocked off the bus, he'd wait for them to say, I'm sorry, and pick him up. That wasn't going to happen. So we didn't last there very long. Plus the fact that Michael was 14, and I couldn't, in good conscience, tell him, you have to live there because I want to live there and then go in the army. So we came back.
How long were you there for?
3 months this summer. And then we came back. And then I went many times afterwards. And Lisa and Todd went with me. And Israelis have been in my life pretty much ever since.
Because of your
Even
family
Benji.
members?
What?
Because of Benji?
Because of Benji. My Benji. Because of what?
Just because you had a connection
I
with...
have a connection with Israel mentally much more, not with Germany.
Do you feel any connection to Germany whatsoever?
Not at all. If I could be reborn, that would not be where it would be. I mean, who wants that history? Not me.
Do you think you would ever go back?
To live?
No. To visit?
No, not on your... No. I didn't like it then. I didn't like it when I went back. No, I don't like Germany. I don't like Germans.
Did your parents ever go back afterwards to look for
No.
family members?
No.
Yeah.
I think we all wanted to be Israelis or Palestinians, whatever. That was the original plan.
Mm-hmm.
Or wherever. I mean, Argentina, Bolivia, but not, yeah. This just happened. We happened to luck out. Miraculously.
Okay.
We done?
No, it was just I heard it playing. So why did you decide to tell or share your story with me today?
Because my generation is dying off. And I really felt, years ago I was asked, and I felt I didn't really have anything to contribute because I don't really have a memory of what went on in Germany. So I really didn't, think it was pertinent. So, but now that there's very few of us left, whatever I can contribute for the next generations, just to know that there's life after all this horror. And did I say in this that I never expected to hear the word Holocaust again? Did I say that?
No.
Okay, when October 7th happened, and I heard the word Holocaust, which it was, basically, in my lifetime to hear the word Holocaust again, ever, just blew my mind. So yes, that kind of made me want to do this. I never want anybody to experience that. And it's not over. Because we're very oppressed. Jews are hated. We're a very, very small minority. And I wouldn't want to be anything else.
What would you like to tell? Well, first of all, is there anything else you'd like to share or add about yourself?
Yeah, I am who I am. And because of what I don't know if it's because of what I was or what I became. This is how I evolved. And do I have any regrets of what happened to me? None. I mean, I'm here. I could have been pizza. I actually, at my age, would have been pizza because I was a 3-year-old. So, and my brother also. So my regrets are that I never got to meet my family, my grandparents. I never knew their love. They never knew mine. Like I have with my kids. I mean, I don't know that it would be the same because different cultures, but I know what I feel and what I have with my girls. It nobody can feel that. I would have liked to have experienced some of that. My daughter experienced it. My children experienced it, I think, with my mother because she lived with us. So, yes, they had a grandmother. Yeah. And she adored them. So, and my father got to meet all of his grandchildren before he died. Todd was 10 weeks old, but my father saw him. So I'm grateful for that. And that's it. Now you want to see my pictures?
Oh, one more question. Is there anything you'd like to tell future generations?
Yeah, stay strong. Don't let anybody crap on you. Just stay strong and be who you are and fight for your rights and for the rights of humanity. Everybody, not just Jews, everybody. The world, I mean, there's four letters in the word hate, H-A-T-E. There's 4 letters in the word love. Why? Why can't people love? Or hope? Why hate? Look what it created. I mean, all these innocent dead people for nothing. And the way they died. And the way they were killed because they were Jews. When somebody said to me, why did they die? Because they were Jews. That was the reason. There was no other reason. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you...
So Aviva, tell me about this dress.
This dress was brought back to Germany with my father brought the dress and a vest, and there used to be a purse from Yugoslavia, which is now what country? I think it's Serbia, right? Anyway, he brought it back from Yugoslavia while he was there in hiding.
And what year would you say?
I think it's probably 1937.
And did you bring this?
Apparently I brought it because it's here.
Aviva, can you tell me who's in this picture?
That's me wearing the dress that you just saw in Germany. I'm probably about 2.5.
And who is in this picture?
I don't know who the other child is, but that's me wearing the dress. So it's either in Germany or in Walla Walla.
Aviva, who's in this picture?
That's a picture of my mother with my baby brother and me in Berlin, probably shortly before we left.
What year is that?
I would say it's probably 38, early 39. He was born in 38, so yeah.
Aviva, what is this?
That's called a Kennkarta. It's my identity card that I guess was given to me after Crystal Night in Berlin. And if you open it, you'll see there's a swastika inside. That's the inside of the Kennkarta. On the outside, it had the J for Jude, which is Jew. And the inside, it's the swastika. And I don't know when it was given to me, but I guess it was given to me in case I was ever picked up. That's my birth certificate from Ushersleben. The picture of the 4 of us in the judge's chambers on November 11th, 1944, when my parents became naturalized citizens, and my brother and I became along with them. That's my brother on the left, then it's me in my little brownie uniform, my mother, my father, and the judge. And then the one next to it is when I got my own citizenship papers in San Francisco when I was 12, I think.
And
Oh, me? My father, I think the picture just explains who he was with the peace sign and the whole thing. He was just a human being for humanity.
And what are your parents' names?
My father's name was Franklin Fritz Cohn, changed to Franklin. And my mother was Meta Cohn, Meta Finkelstein Cohn, changed to Miriam. That's Michael, my oldest son, who was born March 25th, 1960. He's now a professor, philosophy professor at North Kentucky University or Northern Kentucky, NKY. That's it. But, oh, who's that? Oh, that's Lisa and me. That's my daughter, Lisa, born September 10th, 1969. Mother of, do you want me to say that? Do I need that? Mother of Alexa and Ariana. Ready?
Who's in the picture?
Todd, my son, who was born April 27th, 1971. His wife, Rachel, whose birthday is January 18th, 71. My granddaughter, Amber, on the left, who is born September 10th, 2002. And Molly, on the right, born September 20th, 2005? She's 18. 2005? I don't know. And these are Lisa's daughters. Ariana on the left, who is September 9th, 2002. And Alexa on the right, who is November 27th, 2000.
And are they your grandchildren?
Pardon me?
Your granddaughters?
My granddaughters. That's it. I have no more that I know of. I'm ready. This is a picture of Stolpersteine, which means stumbling blocks, which my brother and I had placed in the sidewalk in front of my grandparents' apartment house in Berlin. The one on the left is my grandfather, Max. It tells you the date he was born, the date he was picked up, and where he was killed. The middle one is my Uncle Herman, my mother's brother. Same thing. And on the right is my grandmother, Marta. Same thing. My uncle was picked up a little later than my grandfather and grandmother, who were picked up together. And they were taken in an elder transport to Riga, Latvia, and killed. And my uncle in the middle was taken to Auschwitz and was killed.